The night I crossed into Area 51, a bedtime telling, slow and low. Breathe in and let the desert exhale with you. Close your eyes and picture a road that forgets where it started. A two-lane seam of asphalt, stitched through a quilt of night. Headlights float, then settle, as if they are feathers that finally choose the ground. The sky is a bowl turned upside down, full of stars that do not quite sit still. And me, a photographer who should have gone home at dusk, riding the last mile into a story that never wanted an audience. Out here, in the silver hush of Nevada, signs do the talking. Metal rectangles with cold voices. No trespassing. Photography prohibited. Use of deadly force authorized. They glimmer when the high beams skim their faces, and then they go dark, like eyes that blink only when you aren't brave enough to hold the stare. I tell myself I'm only collecting silence. That silence, under the right lens, can be a kind of light. I tell myself the air is cooler now, that the engine's tick-tick is friendlier than it was an hour ago. And I tell myself, with a smile I don't really feel, that I'll stop at the next turnout, and that will be enough. It was never enough. I pull over beside a stand of Joshua trees, their arms frozen mid-gesture, like they're explaining something important that I'm not ready to hear. The sand crunches under my boots, a careful, slow sugar. My camera hangs heavy, familiar against my ribs, the old strap whispering with every shift of shoulder. I breathe through my nose, slow and steady, the way I do when I try to make time longer. The wind is low tonight. It carries the faint metallic tang you taste near old fences. And beneath that, the dry sage note that means no rain tonight, not for you. I step past the line where the highway stops pretending to be safe. There is a cattle gate, not much higher than my chest, and beyond it the famous nowhere that people shout about in the day and whisper about at night. Area 51 is not a number when you are walking. It is a temperature, a pulse, a place in your throat that tightens and then forgets how to loosen. I keep low, not because anyone is watching, but because it feels polite to be small. The stars are swarming. The Milky Way is a bruise across the sky. I shoulder the camera bag higher, and I talk to myself the way you do when there's no one who can contradict you. Just a few long exposures. Just the road and the horizon, and maybe a streak of something that belongs to no schedule. Just proof that the night touched me back. Somewhere to my right, miles off, a security light flares and then dies, like a match pinched shut between gloved fingers. Somewhere behind me, farther than my life and closer than my name, a vehicle shifts its weight on gravel, then gives up the thought and gets still again. I reach the first sign. It is ordinary up close, with bolts you can count and scratches that seem like letters from a broken alphabet. I set the tripod with careful knees, a ritual of angles, legs nested in the sand like a patient insect. The camera goes on with a click I feel in my teeth. The lens looks out at the place where the desert starts pretending it can keep secrets. I make 3 frames. Stars in slow lines. The horizon a thin eyelid of land. The shutter whispers open, holds its breath, and then closes like a door that has learned courtesy. I wait. I listen. I learn the silence by heart. On the 4th frame, I hear it. Not a sound exactly, more like a subtraction of sound, as if the desert turned its face away while someone stepped into the room. The Joshua trees sigh, and then all their spines point inward, toward a seam in the earth I have not noticed, a smoothness among ripples, a stripe of sand that refuses to be ruffled. I lower the tripod an inch, zoom in. The stripe is wide enough for a bus and as shallow as a handprint. And something beneath it. Something not content to be beneath is moving. Listen. The sand does not lift. It dimples, collapses, sighs back into itself, as if a school of fish is swimming just under the surface of a lake made of dust. The movement is patient. It becomes a pattern, then a language, then a warning my bones understand before the rest of me can agree. I shoot another frame, then another, then a burst, just for myself, the way you laugh at a joke you won't repeat. The lights start as a mistake, a tiny mistake in the dark, a dot that refuses to be a star because it is inside the land instead of the sky. Then a second dot, lower and to the left. Then a string of them, curving like a necklace dropped into deep sand. They do not shine like flashlights. They do not burn like flares. They glow the way moss glows when you are 10 years old, and the forest is not a place, but a promise. Green with a seam of honey, blue with a memory of white. They skate just under the surface, and every so often the sand becomes thin enough for their shapes to smear the air above them. I forget to breathe. Then I remember, and the breath is loud, too loud, and the lights pause as if I am a note in their score. I take the longest exposure of my life, 7 minutes, 11 seconds. During those minutes, I am only a listening animal. The tripod is a prayer. The shutter is a lid that opens and opens again. The wind steps away like a considerate friend. And far off, not far at all, something watches me back, though I cannot say from which direction. When the exposure closes, the camera makes a soft, satisfied sound, and the sand answers. It rises. Not all of it. A sheet as thin as breath lifts from the rest, as if a giant, invisible hand has slid a blade under the desert and flexed. The lights slide closer to the surface, and then move apart, like eyes widening. I step back, knee knocks tripod, a small clatter swallowed by a larger hush. The lights rearrange in a rectangle, then fold into a trapezoid, then into a shape I feel I should know and cannot. My scalp prickles in tidy rows, like fresh snow combed by wind. It's all right, I say aloud, because that is what you say when you want it to be true. I am only looking. The sand exhales. A low, warm air, as if from a furnace that lives a long way down. It washes across my shins, up my knees, and I can feel the tiny grains tap dance against my jeans like rain, desperate to convince itself it is water. Then, a sound I will hear forever when rooms go quiet, a whisper layered over itself 100 times, as if a choir has been recorded from the next room through a wall of wool. It is not language. It is the shape language makes in your mind just before it finds you. I hit record. The camera begins to listen with me. Its tiny red lamp hides behind black tape. Habit. But I can see the faintest pulse, an embarrassed heartbeat through skin. The whisper grows thicker. It is not closer. It is more. It spills into the air like steam that has learned how to stay cold. Words begin to almost form. Names I have only read as jokes in articles older than my life. coordinates that feel like promises. And underneath, the steady hum of something that never learned to stop. My feet are sinking. I do not notice at first because it is slow and considerate. But when I shift, one boot does not move as it should. And I look down, and the sand is cuffed around my ankle like a fawn-colored hand. Okay, I say. Okay. My voice is soft, too soft for this big night. And I laugh again, because the alternative is not something I do. I slide the tripod back. The sand tightens its cuff, then releases with the smallest sigh. I step free, and the grains slither into the ankle-shaped hole as if grateful for the recipe. The lights return to a curve. They gather themselves, shiver like a breath held a beat too long, and then they do something that pushes all the air out of me. They arrange into a row, and in that row, one by one, they tilt up and look at me. There is no face, just a change in intention, light that points itself, like an ear learning to be an eye. I feel it in my teeth. I feel it in the thin skin over my knuckles. And somewhere that is not aware, just behind my heart, something clicks open. The camera drinks the moment, a low chime in its throat, the buffer a little drunk, the card a little full. I whisper into the mic, words for me, for you, for whoever finds this and wonders why the narrator sounds both calm and very far away. This is the dry lake bed, I say. This is the nowhere I was told was nothing. This is the night the sand learned how to float. The ground hums. The Joshua trees lean and lean and do not fall. And the lights beneath the sand begin to move in a rhythm that is not quite music and not quite math. I realize I have stepped over another sign. This one is a tire track pounded into the earth, a dead ribbon that leads off toward a rise of land so gentle it might be a sigh. I follow, because that is all I have done all my life. Follow the feeling that the next frame might be the one that makes it make sense. My boots scuff and slide. The whispers patch themselves together. A quilt of not quite words. My name, not the one on my driver's license, flashes and is gone. A place I have never been and will go. A room with chairs that do not believe in legs. A long hall that folds in the middle like a closing book. I am not afraid. That is the strangest part. I am not brave either. I am quiet. And I move the way you do in a house that is not yours, but has decided it will allow you. At the ridge, I set the tripod again. The camera peers down, and so do I. A basin spreads out below. Not wide, not small. No word is willing to hold it. In the center, the sand is smooth as a paused breath. And there, under that silk, the lights curve and curl and settle into a spiral with a slow heart at its center. The whispers thicken. They come from under the spiral, and they come from behind me, and they come from the side of my head that I cannot see. They are careful with me. I feel this the way you feel the weather decide to be kind. I turn the focus ring by feel. The glass sighs. The world tightens, snaps, eases. And in that moment, the sand lets go of being sand. It liquefies. That is the closest word without becoming wet. It releases its idea of itself, and in the release, it becomes a window. For a single slow breath, I see through the top layer, and the lights below are not lights at all. They are shapes, flat but deep, thin but endless, like circuits carved into darkness with a finger that learned how to be fire. They run along channels that were never cut and always there. A geometry I did not meet in school, because that geometry never learned chalk. I should kneel, should pound the shutter like a drum, but all I can do is press the button once, one true long press, and whisper to the camera, please. The exposure begins. The air grows thick enough to lean on. Another vehicle, or a shadow pretending to be one, passes a long way off, then dissolves into the thought of itself. Something immense shifts beneath the basin. Not like a machine, not like anything. A continent rolling in its sleep. I could stop here. I could pick up the tripod and walk back to the road and invent a better story. But the night has decided it will confess to me, and I have learned not to interrupt confessions. Show me, I say, and the lights oblige. They tighten the spiral. The center dims to a dark that is not the absence of light, but the presence of a deeper kind. Then, from the edges inward, the lights sink and rise, as if breathing through the sand. Each rise leaves a ruffle on the surface, a delicate ridge that slides, soft as satin, toward the middle. When the ridges meet, they cancel each other and leave behind a stillness too precise to be natural. The whispers find language for a moment and then lose it. Like a dream, you are not quite awake enough to steal. We are under. We have always been. Not yours, not theirs. Here. The last word is not a word, and it holds everything. My camera, faithful and foolish, keeps recording. Some part of me is already grateful that cameras do not know how to be afraid. I step closer. The sand does not mind. It accepts my weight as if it was waiting for the measure. At the edge of the basin, where the spiral breathes its slow, I kneel. The grains hiss around my knees like warm tea poured into cold porcelain. The spiral stills. It listens to me as I have listened to it. I do not speak. Some seconds are too slender to hold words without breaking. Then I hear, not with my ears, the click of a shutter far away, a sibling to mine, a memory of a camera pointed up from beneath, starving to eat the same stars I am absorbing from above. I lift the tripod, careful, and I angle the lens low, so the lip of the basin cuts the frame like a thin horizon, and the spiral's breath is the weather. Last one, I say. I will go. And I mean it, and I do not. The exposure begins. 7 minutes feels like an hour like a paragraph. The stars smear themselves generous, and the spiral keeps its temperature. I am a stone that learned patience. I am a mouth that learned quiet. When the shutter closes, the basin exhales. The sound is not loud, but it is bigger than my life. The spiral loosens. The lights slip their attention from me. and the sand remembers that it once believed in gravity. That is when the whisper changes. It moves behind me, beside me, within my mouth. It speaks through the camera before it uses me. It says, in no language anybody claims, and in all of them at once. Go. I obey. I do not run. The night does not want me to run. But I move with the generosity of someone who has been given a secret and wishes to keep it properly. The ridge accepts me back. The Joshua trees direct me with patient elbows. The signs blink their square eyes and pretend they have not been blinking the whole time. I walk until the whispers thin to silk. I walk until the highway finds me. I walk until the road remembers my name. I am almost at the car when the night makes a small wrong sound. A footstep that isn't mine. A weight in the sand that does not belong to wind. I turn slowly, like someone turning a page they aren't finished with. And something stands there, taller than me by the amount the sky is taller than the desert. No shape will hold it. It is both narrower and wider than my courage. It is the suggestion of a figure stitched out of not light. Where it stands, the stars bend a little, like reeds near a patient river. I do not lift the camera. I do not want to turn it into proof. I want to turn it into a memory that belongs to me without witnesses. Thank you, I say. Not because manners will save me, but because gratitude sometimes convinces a night to leave you the way it found you. It tilts the way a head tilts when trying to hold a small, interesting sound. Then it reaches, not with an arm, with itself, and touches the camera. Just the edge of it, the friendliest edge it owns. The camera slides in its clip, tugs, lifts, and then simply isn't where it was. No violence, no theft. A resorting of ownership. I do not chase. Some parts of the desert would prefer not to be pursued. The figure fades, not backward, but downward. The sand closes like a mouth around a polite secret. The stars flatten, slightly ashamed of their curiosity. And the road finds its voice again, that long, humming sermon about distance and return. I stand there until my calves decide they have worshipped the night enough. Then I climb into the car. The keys are where I left them. The engine remembers how to wake. I drive without music. The desert pours itself past like a warm drink. Now and then a checkpoint becomes a rumor. A rumor becomes an empty place where men in uniforms are always just about to be. No one stops me. No one tries. I do not realize my hands are trembling until the steering wheel tells me it is tired of holding them still. I do not go home. I go where you go when the night has spoken, to the only diner for 100 miles, where coffee pretends to be sleep, and sleep pretends to be coffee. Inside, the air smells like butter and stories. A cook who has seen angels in truck headlights nods at me and slides a mug with a ring of steam around its lips. A waitress with hair pulled back like a promise drops a menu and asks if I want the kind of eggs that can cure anything. I saw lights, I say. She glances at the clock. At this hour? She smiles a small, excellent smile. That's what the night is for. I reach for the camera. I reach for what isn't there. My hand closes on the strap, empty and obedient. Forgot something? She asks. Yes, I say. No, I add. I think it remembered me instead. She pours more coffee, because sometimes that is the correct ritual for whatever you have said. When I finally go outside, dawn is a pale rumor sneaking under the door of the world. The parking lot has been scrubbed by wind. My car looks relieved to still be a car. I drive again, that last short pilgrimage before sleep. And somewhere on that last stretch, where the road dips and lifts like a sigh, I see, in the rear view, a small red light winking. No other cars. No taillights. Just a brief pulse, low to the ground, like a heartbeat that forgot itself and then remembered. I do not stop. I do not slow. I learn the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, rest. And then it is gone. At home, I sleep like people do when the night has borrowed some of their hours. The dream is a thin veil, and behind it, the desert is folding itself neatly on a shelf. A whisper threads through the weave of sleep, the same kind, the same careful voice, and it says, "Here." I wake to a doorbell. Morning has found a mouth and is speaking. The peephole shows me a rectangle of uniform. Not military, local. A deputy with desert in the tread of his boots, and a pen that has learned to wait. He asks me my name. He asks me whether I lost anything last night. He asks me to come with him if I'm awake enough to learn a new idea. We drive 2 towns over, where the land is flatter than a promise. Past a shuttered gas station that ran out of summer 5 years ago. Past a paint-peeled mailbox that everyone knows and nobody claims. At a bend in the road that pretends to be a circle, he pulls over. He points. And there, in the ditch, beyond the low fence, my camera sits, as if it never learned how to stand. It is dusty, but unhurt. The strap has a new crease, the way a book's spine tells you it has been believed. The lens cap is missing, but the glass is clean, as someone's intention. We found it a couple of hours ago, the deputy says. Chief thought you'd want it back. He waits, because the next words need to be made of careful shapes. And then he produces a bag with a memory card in a clear coffin. Was this yours too? I swallow. It is. It isn't. It is more mine now than it was when I lost it. I thank him. I sign a small stack of paper that is not interested in the truth, only in ink. He nods, and it is a kind nod, and then he dissolves back into the road like a patient mirage. At home, I wash my hands as if the desert might still be clinging to them and might not want to be. I make coffee that tastes like intentions. And I do what you know I've been wanting to do since 3 pages ago. I slide the memory card into the reader and let the machine translate last night into squares of light. The first frames are what you'd expect. Stars that forgot how to sit still. The rim of the basin like a thin wrist. A Joshua tree in the corner. Fingers crooked in a benediction that might also be a warning. Then come the frames with the line of not lights. They are shy at first, like children pretending to be clouds behind a sheet. Long exposures show their patience, the slow calligraphy of their travel beneath the surface. They are not bulbs. They are not beams. They are punctuation marks in a grammar that does not use letters. Then the long exposure, 7 minutes and 11 seconds. And The sand is a low veil. The spiral is a bright thought, tightening, loosening, like the brain of an old god, deciding it will open one eye. I lean forward, slow, as if my face could be a magnifying glass. In the far corner, very small, a shadow that is a suggestion that is not a shadow. A lean absence. The shape that pulled the camera like a thought you can't quite stop thinking. I exhale. The room, exhale, answers. There are audio files, too. The mic did its best. The whispers are there, thin as necklaces, soft as felt. I play them through speakers that never asked to be theologians. And in the hush between hiss and hum, the night speaks again. And this time the human world turns its head and pretends it didn't hear. We are under. We are above. This is not a place you can own. This is a place you can belong, if you learn how to listen. The last file is different. It is short, less than a minute, and the waveform is thin, like a heartbeat seen from far away. I press play. There is the hush of the room under the basin. There is the soft sibilant of sand remembering it has always known the word ocean. And there is, just once, a sound like a shutter far below me, opening for the longest exposure any sky has ever offered. Then, the faintest thing, the red lamp's pulse, a small mechanical sigh, and a voice that I recognize with the kind of recognition that has no source. It is my voice, not recorded from my mouth, recorded from the memory the night kept of me. Here, silence unrolls itself carefully and covers the room. I sit with it. We are old friends who never quite met. I back up the files. 2 drives, then 3. Print 1 frame. The shallow basin with its silk of light, and tack it to the corkboard with a pin that has been refusing to scream since college. I tell no one, not the forums, not the boys who will write like prophets and laugh like bells. I sleep at odd hours. I carry sand in the cuffs of my jeans like I'm smuggling a small beach past customs. At night, I sometimes drive again, not to cross any lines, only to park where the road forgets itself and let the engine tick down to quiet. I listen for a whisper that isn't obligated to arrive. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it is only the wind reciting its favorite poem about distance. Weeks later, after the story has had time to grow branches, I receive a padded envelope with no return. Inside, my missing lens cap, clean as a new moon. Taped to it, a strip of red plastic, the kind you might use to hide a small, polite light. No note, no fingerprints, no nonsense. I laugh. It sounds like air remembering it can be warm. I press the cap to the lens, and it clicks home, a soft, specific sound, the sound of a circle finding itself again. That night, the dreams are busy. Not frightening. Full. Rooms that open into rooms. A long hall that folds and folds until it is a ring. Voices that do not trample each other. Voices that braid, that listen to themselves listening. And always, under it, a slow spiral that has as many centers as there are people who have ever stood quietly enough to deserve belonging. The desert will not confirm any of this. The signs will continue to be square. People will keep driving and stopping and deciding that they are done stopping. The sky will do its generous routine with the lights we are allowed to name. But sometimes, if you kneel, if you ask with the kind of silence that thinks it's an answer, the sand will thin, and what lives beneath will glance up, not to scare you, not to shame you, not to take you, only to count you, only to include you in the census of those who listened. So rest now. Let the road soften. Let the basin slow its breath so you can match it. Let the whisper find you. Wherever your bed happens to be, however the dark chooses to drape itself across your shoulders tonight. And if, when you are almost asleep, a sound like a small shutter sighs from the radiator or the window, or the part of your room that avoids names, do not be surprised. Do not be afraid. That is only the night, filing you carefully under the word here. Days pass. I pretend to forget. The desert pretends to let me. At noon, I drive the safe roads and learn the daylight version of the fence. Sun-bent posts, a hinge that squeals like a bird that lives on heat. I stand on public land with tourists and point my lens at clouds. Then put the lens down and listen for a whisper that should not exist under a sky this blue. The deputy calls once. No questions, only a silence that waits politely and then hangs up. I save his number anyway. I label it with a word I do not mean to write: witness. At home, I run the audio through a spectrogram. In the blue-green fog of frequencies, a staircase appears. Not letters, not numbers. Steps. When I trace them with the cursor, my speakers answer with a tone like a finger drawn around the rim of a glass bowl. The note bends north, then west, then down, as if a map can be sung. A librarian in town watches me fail gently at research and slides a stack of old desert surveys across the desk. She says, "Try these." She says, some places were measured by people who believed in straight lines. I find a 1950 note about a dry lake that sometimes was not where it should be. Night again. I bring a metronome, small and wooden. The tick like a heartbeat that learned how to stand up. I set it on my dashboard and drive until the road becomes a thought I could finish if I wanted. The metronome says 72. The desert says slower. At the safe line, I do not cross. I park and wait. Stars repeat their patient argument with darkness. Somewhere, out where the sand keeps its secrets, a single blink answers the metronome with a soft offbeat, like a friend who prefers harmony to rhythm. I whisper, "I hear you." The whisper that is not mine answers, "We hear you." I record without moving. The camera listens from the passenger seat, window open, the red light hidden again under polite tape. The audio prints a braided thread. Tick, breathe, blink, breathe, tick, blink. The braid points to the basin as surely as a compass that has learned to sing. The next morning, I take the staircase from the spectrogram and overlay it on the sheriff's map that hangs in the diner behind the pie case. The waitress watches me with a face that has measured stranger things than tourists. "Where does it say to go?" she asks. I say, not where, how. She pours coffee the way people pour blessings. On the third night, I stop pretending I will not return. The metronome rides in the back seat. I bring 2 tripods, fresh cards, and the lens cap that came home like a message. I walk only as far as the ridge. The basin sleeps like a cat that will forgive your footsteps if you keep the respect in them. I set one tripod to watch the spiral and the other to watch me. I say into the second camera, for the record, I do not want proof. I want a conversation. The night answers with a small wind that smells like old copper and rain that never learned water. The sand considers. Then the spiral brightens, as if someone below has lifted a lampshade. Ridges gather, slip inward, cancel, leave the stillness that is their signature. I hum a single note and raise it a half step. The spiral answers with a pulse like a blink traveling outward along invisible veins. I stop humming. The pulse continues. It slows until it matches the metronome tucked under my jacket, ticking against my ribs. I turn the metronome off. The pulse does not stop. The desert has found its own tempo, and I am the one learning to keep time. Footprints appear beside mine, as if the sand is replaying a past where someone walked with me. They are longer than my stride and lighter than my fear. I walk in them anyway, and the ground carries me as if remembering practice. Halfway down the ridge, the whisper becomes language again, then breaks, then returns, a trying, like a child tasting hard vowels. You are not wrong, it says. We do not climb. We open. Something opens. Not a door. A decision. The basin thins to window again. But this time the view is not down. It is sideways. A corridor of not light, with chairs that finally believe in legs, with walls that are only there to teach you where you can lean. I see people who are not people. They are suggestions, the way music suggests a room full of air. They move the way patience moves. When one passes close to the window of sand, the stars above me bend in agreement. I lower my head and do not take a picture. In the car later, the dashboard recorder plays back more than I spoke. Between my words, another voice rides. Not mine, not a copy. It says, belonging is the opposite of ownership. The recorder clicks, as if it would like to be excused from theology. Daylight takes me hostage for a week. Work, groceries, small talk that has done time and wants parole. But at night, my hands remember the weight of tripods, the way old sailors remember the angle of decks in weather. In town, the librarian finds me again and tells me about petroglyphs etched into a dry wash 2 days north. Spirals, ladders, a long line that breaks and continues on the other side of a gap. A map that shows you how to stop insisting on straight roads. I drive there in the afternoon and kneel until my knees learn the grammar of knees. The rock is warm. A lizard watches me without blinking and knows more than I do about silence. I trace the spiral with a finger that learned how to be careful. For a breath, just one, the fingertip hums, and a low note rustles the hair on my arm. I come back to the basin with the dust of petroglyphs still inside my cuffs. Tonight, the wind makes a small instrument out of the fence. The spiral waits, as if it has been promised a better question. I ask, what do you count? The answer arrives without sound, and arrives everywhere. Footsteps across history, people who knelt and listened and were counted, bright insects that winter under warm stone, cameras that were patient and did not insist on proof. The basin is an abacus made of breath. Clouds arrive from the west, slow animals with silver backs. The spiral brightens under their bellies. Lightning rehearses far away, a polite strobe that does not interrupt. For a minute, the sky and the sand share custody of light, and I am the document they sign. The figure comes back as if it never left. It stands where the road would put a person, not where the basin would hide a guest. It has learned something about my height and has decided to be closer to it. I do not offer the camera. I offer the metronome. It lifts without touching, turns once, sets itself down with the tick already aligned to the pulse under the sand. A small lesson. Time is a place you can share. The deputy's truck idles on the far shoulder, a red coal of a tail light, thinking about being a star. He does not approach. I raise a hand, 2 careful beats. He answers with the same pattern. Later, he will say we should never write this down. I will agree, and then not do as I am told. A storm finally chooses us. Big drops that almost remember snow. The basin does not flood. It learns wetness the way a cat learns a new room, suspicious, and inevitable. The spiral dims, but the pulse remains, like embers that prefer the long game. I sleep in the car, coat over my face, and dream a corridor that bends into a ring. When I wake, my watch shows a time that cannot be true and refuses to argue. The storm has left a skin of glass on the road. My footprints have become small lakes. Back home, I print 3 frames for the librarian, the waitress, the deputy. I write nothing on the backs. I wrap them in brown paper like bread. The deputy returns his to me a week later with a note. Keep it somewhere the night can see itself. I move the corkboard to the window. The spiral photo faces out. At noon, it reflects the neighbor's maple, as if the tree is learning desert. At midnight, the glass holds a small red wink that is not in the room. Another envelope arrives. Not the lens cap this time, but a thin square of shimmering, flexible material. Red from one angle, blue from another, transparent when you ask kindly. I hold it over the printed spiral, and the image deepens, the way a pond deepens when a cloud slides away from the sun. The librarian calls this a film. The deputy calls it a risk.
The waitress calls it pretty and tapes a corner of it to the pie case so the lemon meringue glows like a small edible nebula. I call it a yes. The last return to the basin is not last at all. I know that now. I go with empty pockets and the metronome in my palm like a bird that likes clocks. The spiral waits, polite as always. I say, I will not take more than you give. I say, I will not speak for you.
I say, if I am counted, count me as someone who listened. The sand lifts in a thin breath, and the pulse finds the exact tempo of my heart without asking permission. For a time, I do not measure it. The corridor and the sky share the same room. The figure stands at the place where my height meets its intention. It nods in a way that does not require a neck. When I leave, the metronome ticks once by itself and then sleeps. On the road back, the red wink rides the white line like a companion animal. In the mirror, stars practice being rivers. At home, I write this down not as proof, not as warning, but as a map of how to listen. If you go small, kneel, breathe with the sand. If it answers, do not try to own the answer. Let it count you.